Molly Peterson was supposed to be in bed 2 hours ago. But here she was, crouched behind the storage shed at the edge of the colony, staring at something she couldn't quite believe. Two small creatures lay in the dirt, barely moving. They had scales that shimmered even in the dim light, wings folded awkwardly against their bodies, and faces that looked almost like tiny dinosaurs. One of them was making soft whimpering sounds that made Molly's chest hurt. She was only 7 years old, but she knew hurt when she saw it. The bigger one, about the size of a large cat, had burns across its back. The scales were blackened and peeling. The smaller one was in worse shape. Its wing bent at an angle that definitely wasn't right, and there was a gash along its side that oozed something dark and sticky. Molly's parents had told her a million times not to go near the native creatures on this planet. The research station where they worked was surrounded by wilderness full of things that could be dangerous. But these weren't dangerous. These were babies. And they were dying. She looked back at the main building. The lights were still on in the lab where her mom and dad worked. They'd be there for hours yet. They always were. That's what happened when you were the only xenobiologists on a frontier colony world. Everyone needed your help, and there was never enough time. Molly made a decision. She pulled off her jacket and carefully wrapped it around the smaller creature. It was heavier than she expected, and warm. So warm it surprised her. The creature's eyes opened just a little, golden and bright, and looked right at her. There was something in that look. Something smart. Something that understood she was trying to help. Getting them both inside was harder than she thought. The bigger one could barely walk, stumbling and falling every few steps. Molly half-carried, half-dragged them through the back door of their living quarters, leaving a trail of dirt and dried leaves across the floor. Her mom was going to kill her for that alone. But that was a problem for later. She cleared space on her bedroom floor and grabbed the first aid kit from the bathroom. Her dad had shown her how to use it last year after she fell off her bike and scraped up her knee real bad. Clean the wound, apply antibacterial gel, bandage it up. Easy. Except these weren't scraped knees. These were serious injuries on creatures she didn't understand. But she had to try. Molly started with the burns on the bigger one. She used water to carefully clean away the dirt and debris, working as gently as she could. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. It watched her with those golden eyes, making soft clicking sounds deep in its throat. The smaller one responded with similar clicks, like they were talking to each other. The antibacterial gel probably wasn't made for alien scales, but it was all she had. She spread it carefully over the burns and wrapped them in gauze. The creature's breathing seemed to ease a little. The broken wing was trickier. Molly remembered her dad talking about setting bones, how they needed to be straight to heal properly. She found popsicle sticks in the kitchen and used them as splints, taping them carefully along the wing's length. The small creature whimpered but held still, as if it knew she was helping. The gash was the worst part. Molly cleaned it as best she could, used half a tube of gel, and wrapped it with most of the gauze she had left. Her hands were shaking by the time she finished. She wasn't sure if she'd done enough. She wasn't sure if they'd make it through the night. But they were breathing easier now. The bigger one curled protectively around the smaller one, and they both watched Molly with what looked like gratitude. She brought them water in a bowl. They drank eagerly, making grateful chirping sounds. By midnight, Molly was exhausted. The creatures had fallen asleep, their breathing steady and deep. She grabbed her pillow and a blanket and lay down on the floor next to them. The bigger one shifted slightly, moving closer until its warm scales pressed against her side. Molly reached out and rested her hand on its neck. Under her palm, she could feel its heartbeat, strong and steady. They were going to be okay. She'd make sure of it. Outside, the twin moons of the colony world rose high into the sky. In the distant mountains, something ancient stirred. The Dragon Queen had felt the moment her grandchildren's distress signals finally stopped. Either they were dead, or someone had helped them. She spread her massive wings and took flight, determined to discover which. Molly woke up to sunlight streaming through her window and a wet tongue licking her face. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the golden eyes staring down at her and remembered everything. The bigger creature was standing over her, looking much better than last night. The smaller one was still sleeping, but its breathing sounded stronger. Molly sat up and checked her bandage work. The gauze on the burns looked good, no bleeding through. The splint on the wing was still in place. "You guys hungry?" she whispered. The bigger one made a chirping sound and tilted its head. Molly took that as a yes. She snuck into the kitchen and grabbed some leftover chicken from dinner and a container of strawberries. She had no idea what baby dragons ate, but it was worth a try. They devoured everything. The chicken disappeared in seconds, bones and all. The strawberries went almost as fast. The creatures made happy trilling sounds, bumping their heads against Molly's hands like puppies asking for pets. She was scratching behind the bigger one's ear ridges when she heard the front door open. Her heart stopped. Molly? Honey, we're home. Her mom's voice called out from the living room. Molly's dad, Robert, spoke next. Molly, why is there a trail of dirt leading to your room? She heard footsteps coming down the hall. Fast footsteps. There was no time to hide the creatures, no time to come up with a story. The door swung open, and her parents stood there, still in their lab coats, staring at the scene in front of them. Her mom, Kate, went pale. Molly. What? Those. They were hurt, Molly said quickly. Really hurt. I couldn't just leave them to die. Robert stepped closer, his eyes wide. Molly, those are Draka hatchlings. Do you understand what that means? The Draka are the apex predators on this planet. They're incredibly intelligent and incredibly territorial. If their parents find out we have them. They were already dying when I found them. Molly's voice cracked. Nobody else was helping them. What was I supposed to do? Kate pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. Robert. The seismic sensors. Look at the seismic sensors. Robert grabbed his own tablet. The color drained from his face too. Oh no. Oh no no no. What? Molly asked. What's wrong? Her dad knelt down to her level, his hands shaking. Honey, something very large is approaching the colony from the mountain range. Something that registers on equipment designed to detect earthquakes. The hatchlings suddenly became alert. They both stood up, wings spreading slightly, making high-pitched calls that echoed off the walls. The bigger one ran to the window, pressing its face against the glass and calling louder. The colony alarm started blaring. A mechanical voice came over the speakers throughout the building. Attention all personnel. Unidentified massive organism approaching colony perimeter. All civilians report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Kate grabbed Molly's hand. We need to go. Now. I'm not leaving them. Molly pulled free and wrapped her arms around the smaller hatchling. They're scared. Listen to them. They're calling for help. Through the window, Molly saw colonists running toward the central bunker. The defense turrets were rotating, tracking something in the sky. She looked up and felt her breath catch in her throat. Something was blotting out the sun. Wings. Massive wings that stretched wider than any building in the colony. Scales that gleamed like polished metal. A body so large it seemed impossible that it could fly. But it was flying, and it was coming straight toward them. Into the shelter. Robert shouted, trying to pull Molly toward the door. But Molly couldn't move. She was watching the creature descend, and she saw something that her parents didn't see. She saw the way the hatchlings were calling to it. She saw the way their cries changed from distress to joy. She saw recognition in their golden eyes. Dad, wait, Molly said quietly. She's not here to attack us. How could you possibly know that? Kate's voice was shaking. Molly looked at the hatchlings, then at her parents. Because she's their mom. Or grandma. Or something. She's family. And she's coming for her babies. The massive creature circled once above the colony. Molly could see scars across its scales, ancient and deep. This wasn't just any Draka. This was something old. Something powerful. Something that had lived for a very, very long time. The defense turrets fired. Plasma bolts that could punch through starship hull plating hit the creature's scales and bounced off like raindrops. It didn't even slow down. It landed in the open area directly in front of their housing unit. The impact shook the entire building. Pictures fell off the walls. Molly heard glass breaking in the kitchen. The creature's shadow covered everything. Governor Miller's voice came over the emergency channel. All defensive positions, hold fire. I repeat, hold fire. Do not engage. Robert was pulling up news feeds on his tablet. They're saying it's an ancient. One of the original Draka who've lived for thousands of years. Nobody's seen one in over a century. They thought they were extinct. The hatchlings were going crazy now, scratching at the door, desperate to get outside. Molly looked at the massive creature through the window. Its head was larger than a transport vehicle. One of its eyes, golden like the hatchlings, fixed directly on Molly's window. Directly on her. And somehow, Molly wasn't afraid. I need to go out there, she said. Absolutely not, both her parents said at once. But Molly was already moving toward the door, the hatchling scrambling after her. She didn't understand how she knew, but she knew. That creature outside wasn't here to hurt anyone. She was here to meet the person who saved her babies. Molly's hand was on the door handle when her dad grabbed her shoulder. "Molly, please. That thing could kill you without even meaning to. It's too big, too powerful. Just stay inside where it's safe." But Molly shook her head. The hatchlings were pressed against her legs, whimpering and chirping. She could feel their desperation. They needed to see their family. And somehow, deep in her gut, Molly knew that the creature outside needed to see them. "Dad, I'm going. You can come with me or not, but I'm going." Kate and Robert looked at each other. Molly saw something pass between them, the way parents talk without words. Finally, her mom nodded. "We stay right behind you. The second anything looks wrong, we're pulling you back inside." Molly opened the door. The morning air hit her first, cool and crisp. Then she saw the dragon up close for the first time, and her brain struggled to process the sheer size of it. The creature's head alone was as big as her entire house. Its scales weren't just one color but thousands, shifting between silver and gold and deep blue depending on how the light hit them. Each scale looked thick enough to stop a bullet. Scars crisscrossed its body, white lines against the metallic colors, telling stories of battles fought centuries ago. But it was the eyes that caught Molly's attention. Golden eyes, ancient and wise, that looked at her with an intelligence that was almost human. More than human, maybe. The hatchlings bolted past Molly, running as fast as their little legs could carry them. They were chirping and crying, stumbling over each other in their rush. The massive dragon lowered its head closer to the ground, and the baby scrambled up its neck, nuzzling against scales that dwarfed them completely. Molly stood frozen in the doorway. Behind her, she heard her parents' terrified breathing. Around the colony, she knew hundreds of people were watching through windows and security cameras, waiting to see what would happen next. The dragon finished greeting the hatchlings. It touched each one with its snout, gentle despite its size, checking them over. Molly saw the moment the dragon noticed the bandages. Saw how carefully it examined the splintered wing on the smaller one. The creature made a low rumbling sound that Molly felt in her chest more than heard with her ears. Then those ancient golden eyes turned back to Molly. The dragon began to move, and Molly's dad tried to pull her back inside. But she held her ground. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe some part of her understood that running now would be the worst thing she could do. The massive head came closer. And closer. Molly could feel the heat radiating from the dragon's body. Could smell something like cinnamon and smoke. The creature's eye was right in front of her now, bigger than her whole body, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like she was being looked through rather than at. Then the dragon did something that made everyone watching gasp. It lowered its head. All the way down. Until that massive, scarred, ancient head touched the ground at Molly's feet. The impact sent small tremors through the earth. Dust rose up around them. But the dragon held the position, completely still, in a posture of such clear submission that there was no mistaking what it meant. This ancient, powerful creature was bowing to a 7-year-old girl. Molly heard her mom make a choked sound behind her. Somewhere in the colony, someone was shouting in disbelief. But Molly barely noticed. She was staring at the dragon, trying to understand. A voice filled the air. Deep and resonant, speaking words Molly didn't recognize. Then her ear tingled, and she realized the translation device her parents had given her was working. The voice came through again, this time in words she understood. "Little human child." Molly swallowed hard. Hello? I am Vera. I have lived for 3,000 of your years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. In all that time, across all the species I have encountered, none have done what you did last night. Molly's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I just helped them. They were hurt. Yes, Vera said, and there was something like wonder in that ancient voice. You helped them. My grandchildren, fleeing assassins from a rival clan, crashed on your world in a damaged escape pod. Their distress signal broadcast across every communication channel. They passed 3 colonized worlds before reaching yours. Do you know what those other worlds did? Molly shook her head. The first world ignored them. Their sensors detected the pod, marked it as debris, and continued about their business. The second world detected life signs and sent military vessels to intercept. They wanted to capture my grandchildren, to use them as leverage against my clan. The third world. Vera's voice turned hard. The third world tried to destroy the pod entirely, seeing my kind as a threat to be eliminated. The dragon raised its head slightly, though it kept its gaze level with Molly's. But you are a child of a young species, on a small colony, with no power and no advantage to gain. You found my grandchildren dying in the dirt, and you helped them. You used your primitive supplies and your small hands, and you bandaged their wounds. You gave them food and water. You slept beside them to keep them company. You expected nothing in return. Molly felt tears starting to form in her eyes, though she wasn't sure why. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, little one. Vera's voice was gentle now. That is where you are wrong. Almost no one would have done what you did. And that is why I bow. The dragon lowered its head again, even further this time, until its snout nearly touched Molly's feet. You have saved the heirs to the Dragon Imperium. You have shown kindness without calculation. And for that, Molly Peterson, you and your kind have earned something my people have not given to anyone in 1,000 years. The ancient dragon's eye fixed on Molly one more time. You have earned our friendship. Molly didn't know what to say. Her mind was spinning. An ancient dragon was bowing to her, talking about friendship and empires, and all she could think about was how her knees were shaking. I don't understand, she finally managed. I just did what felt right. Precisely, Vera said, raising her head again. You did what felt right. Not what was profitable. Not what was strategic. Not what would benefit you. You saw suffering and you stopped it, expecting nothing in return. Do you know how rare that is in this galaxy? Before Molly could answer, she heard running footsteps. Governor Miller was jogging toward them, flanked by security officers who looked terrified but were trying not to show it. The governor was a tall woman with gray hair and the kind of face that always looked worried. Right now, she looked more than worried. She looked like she might pass out. Ancient Vera, Governor Miller said, slightly out of breath. I'm Governor Lisa Miller of the Draken's Edge colony. We had no idea your grandchildren were on our world. If we had known. If you had known, would you have helped them? Vera's voice wasn't accusatory, just curious. Governor Miller hesitated. We would have reported it to the proper authorities. Filed diplomatic requests through official channels. Waited for clearance from. In other words, no. Vera's massive head swung to look at the governor. You would have done what every other species does. You would have been cautious. Political. By the time your official channels responded, my grandchildren would have been dead. The governor looked down at her feet. She had no answer to that. Vera turned her attention back to Molly, but her voice carried across the entire colony. I have watched your species since you first arrived in this sector. Humans are young. Chaotic. You make mistakes constantly. Other species mock you for your emotional responses, your irrational attachments to creatures that cannot benefit you. They see weakness in your compassion. The hatchlings had climbed down from Vera's neck and were now sitting on either side of Molly, leaning against her legs. She reached down to pet them without thinking. But I have lived long enough to know that compassion is not weakness, Vera continued. I have seen species with superior technology crumble because they forgot how to care for anything beyond themselves. I have watched empires collapse under the weight of their own calculated selfishness. And I have waited, for centuries, to find a species that possessed what my people call the caring fire. What's that? Molly asked. The ability to see suffering and feel compelled to stop it. Not because it helps you. Not because you'll be rewarded. But because watching another being hurt, hurts you too. It's the rarest quality in the universe. And humans have it in abundance. Governor Miller stepped forward again, her voice shaky. Ancient Vera, what exactly are you proposing? The dragon's gaze swept across the colony, across all the people watching from windows and doorways. I propose an alliance. A formal compact between the Dragon Imperium and humanity. We will share our technology, our knowledge, our protection. In return, you will share with us what you have that we lost long ago. Hope. Optimism. The belief that the universe can be better than it is. Molly heard gasps from all around. Her dad's tablet was buzzing like crazy. She saw him reading something, his eyes getting wider. The news networks are going crazy, Robert whispered to Kate. Other species are already filing protests. They're saying it's not fair. The Draka have been neutral for thousands of years. If they ally with humans, then humans become a major power overnight, Kate finished. Oh my God. Governor Miller looked like she was struggling to process everything. Ancient Vera, this is unprecedented. I don't have the authority to accept such an offer. I'd need to contact Earth, get approval from the colonial administration, file proper documentation. No, Vera said simply. The compact is not made with your governments. It is made with your people. With humans who would bandage hurt creatures in the night. With children who see suffering and cannot walk away. With a species that would rather risk everything to help a stranger than play it safe. The dragon lowered her head again, this time looking at all the colonists who had started to gather. I offer this compact to any human who accepts it. To those who believe that kindness matters. That compassion is strength. That the right thing to do is whatever stops suffering, regardless of the cost. Molly felt something building in her chest. She looked at the hatchlings beside her, remembering how scared and hurt they'd been. Remembering how she'd known, absolutely known, that she couldn't just leave them there. I accept, Molly said, her voice small but clear. As do I, Kate said, stepping forward to stand beside her daughter. And I, Robert added, moving to Molly's other side. Governor Miller stood there for a long moment, looking at the dragon, then at Molly, then at the crowd of colonists. More people were emerging from the buildings now, gathering in the open area. Molly saw the Jenkins family, who ran the cafeteria. She saw Dr. Hayes from the medical center. She saw the maintenance crews, the teachers, the farmers. All of them looking at Vera with expressions that ranged from fear to wonder. Show of hands, Governor Miller called out, her voice carrying across the crowd. Who here accepts the Ancients' Compact? Hands went up. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Nearly everyone in the colony raised their hand. Governor Miller looked back at Vera, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. Then I guess I do too. On behalf of the Draken's Edge colony, we accept your compact, Ancient Vera. The dragon made a sound that might have been satisfaction. Then it is done. The first compact between dragons and humans in the history of either species. And it was witnessed by a 7-year-old girl who saw hurt babies and decided to help. Vera's gaze returned to Molly one final time. You changed the galaxy last night, little one. And you didn't even know it. Molly looked down at the hatchlings, who were purring like enormous cats. She thought about how simple it had seemed at the time. They were hurt. She helped. That was all. Maybe that really was all it took to change everything. 15 years passed faster than Molly ever expected. She stood on the balcony of the Dragon Council chambers, looking out over a city that seemed impossible. Crystal spires rose into the clouds, bridges of pure light connected floating platforms, and dragons of every size flew through the air like birds. This was the heart of the Dragon Imperium, and somehow, she belonged here. Are you nervous? A deep voice rumbled beside her. Molly looked up at the massive dragon standing next to her. His scales were deep blue with gold edges, and a ridge of spines ran down his back. She'd named him Blaze when he was small enough to fit in her arms. Now he was the size of a house. Terrified, Molly admitted. I'm about to give a speech to the entire Galactic Council. Half of them still hate that humans got this alliance. Let them hate, another voice said from her other side. This dragon was slightly smaller, with silver scales that shimmered like starlight. Luna, the one whose wing Molly had splintered with popsicle sticks all those years ago, nuzzled against her shoulder. You earned this. We earned this. Together. Molly reached up to scratch behind Luna's ear ridge, the way she'd done 1,000 times before. Some things never changed, even when everything else did. The doors behind them opened. An aide stepped out, looking flustered. Ambassador Peterson? They're ready for you. Ambassador. Molly still wasn't used to that title. She was 22 years old, and she was representing humanity at the highest levels of galactic government. Not because she'd gone to fancy schools or had important parents. But because she'd bandaged 2 hurt babies when she was 7. She walked into the council chamber with Blaze and Luna flanking her. The room fell silent. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in tiered seating that circled the central platform. Molly recognized most of them now. The insectoid Chiracs, who'd been the most vocal opponents of the Human-Dragon Alliance. The aquatic Delphins, who'd remained neutral. The crystalline Prismatics, who'd actually supported the compact from the beginning. And there, in the highest seat, was Vera. The ancient dragon had barely aged in 15 years, though Molly had learned that was normal for her kind. Dragons lived for thousands of years. Vera had been ancient when humanity first discovered fire. The council recognizes Ambassador Molly Peterson of Earth, the session moderator announced. Molly stepped up to the central podium. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them steady on the lectern. Cameras from every major network in the galaxy were pointed at her. Billions of beings would be watching this. 15 years ago, she began, I found 2 hurt babies behind a storage shed. I didn't think about politics or alliances or what it might mean for the future. I just saw 2 creatures that needed help, and I helped them." She saw some of the council members shifting uncomfortably. They didn't like being reminded of how this all started. "A lot of species here have called the Dragon Compact unfair. You've said humans don't deserve the technology and protection we've received. That we haven't earned it." Molly took a breath. "And you know what? You're right. We haven't earned it through military might or economic power or centuries of diplomatic negotiations." Now she had their attention. "We earned it by caring. By seeing suffering and not being able to walk away. By treating strangers like they matter, even when there's nothing in it for us." Molly looked around the chamber. "The Draka offered us this alliance because we have something most species seem to have lost. We still believe that kindness matters. That compassion isn't weakness. That doing the right thing is worth it, even when it's hard." She gestured to Blaze and Luna. "These 2 are my best friends. They are also royalty in the Dragon Imperium. They could have anyone as their guards or advisors. But they chose to stay with me. Do you know why?" Blaze spoke, his voice amplified through the chamber's translation system. "Because she saw us at our weakest. When we were hurt and afraid and alone. And she didn't see an opportunity. She didn't see a political advantage. She saw people who needed help." "That's what humans do," Luna added. "They help. It's annoying sometimes, honestly. They can't pass a stray animal without feeding it. They cry over fictional characters in their entertainment. They feel bad for plants that aren't getting enough sunlight." Some of the council members actually chuckled at that. "But that's also their strength," Luna continued. "Humans build communities across species lines. They make friends with creatures that can't possibly benefit them. They waste resources helping people they'll never see again. And somehow, that waste creates something beautiful." Molly felt her eyes getting wet. She'd prepared a whole political speech, full of fancy words and diplomatic language. But standing here, with her friends beside her, she realized she didn't need it. "The Dragon Compact isn't about humans being special," she said. "It's about remembering that kindness is special. That caring about each other, across all our differences, is what makes civilization worth having. The Draka didn't bow to humanity because we're powerful. They bowed because we showed them something they'd forgotten. That compassion without expectation of reward is the rarest and most valuable thing in the universe." She looked directly at the Chirax delegation. "You can protest all you want. You can call it unfair. But the compact isn't going anywhere. Because it wasn't built on politics or power. It was built on a 7-year-old girl who saw hurt babies and couldn't walk away." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Vera stood, her massive form drawing every eye. "The human speaks truth," the ancient dragon said. "We dragons have watched countless species rise and fall. We have seen empires built on conquest crumble to dust. We have seen alliances forged in greed betray each other at the first sign of weakness. But we have never seen what we see in humans. The determination to help, even when it hurts. The refusal to look away from suffering. The irrational, beautiful belief that things can be better." Vera's golden eyes swept across the council. "That is why we chose them. And we would choose them again." Later, after the session ended, Molly stood with her parents in the embassy gardens. Her mom and dad had aged visibly in the past 15 years, but they looked happy. Proud. "You did good, kiddo," her dad said, pulling her into a hug. "I just told the truth," Molly said. "That's all you've ever done," her mom added, joining the hug. Molly looked up at the sky, where dragons flew in formation with human spacecraft. She thought about all the colonies spreading across the stars, protected by dragon shields. She thought about the technology-sharing programs, the cultural exchanges, the friendships forming between species that had never even spoken before. All of it started because she couldn't leave hurt babies to die. On Earth, in hundreds of cities, statues stood of a little girl bandaging dragon hatchlings. Children grew up hearing the story, learning that one small act of kindness could change everything. That compassion wasn't childish or naive. It was powerful. Blaze and Luna landed beside her, their wings stirring up flower petals. "Ready to go home?" Blaze asked. Molly smiled. "Yeah. Let's go home." As they took flight, soaring between the crystal spires with her best friends, Molly realized something. She'd spent years wondering if she'd really changed the galaxy that night 15 years ago. But the truth was simpler. She hadn't changed the galaxy. She'd reminded it of something it had forgotten. That in a universe full of power and politics and endless calculation, Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is care. And that was a lesson worth remembering.